Hey friends, so today we're going to be making a clay fish, and it's actually going to be made using 2 slabs. But the first thing you need to do is you need to make a sketch in your sketchbook. So your fish needs to be pretty big, so make sure you take up most of the space in your sketchbook. I did a couple of different sketches. I did this one first. I didn't really like the way it looked, so I went ahead and did another one, and I like the way this one looks, so this is the one I'm going to use. Once you make your sketch, make sure that you do have the details like the dorsal fin, the tail, and the mouth shape, so you know what you're going to do with that. You're also going to need to have a pectoral fin, and then you're going to need to have an eye and a line where you want your gill flap to go. You can label these with the colors that you want to use, but you don't have to do that right now. You can do that later. So what you're going to do, this might seem a little bit crazy, but you are actually going to cut this page out of your sketchbook because we're going to use this body to sketch around when we make our fish. So when you cut, you're going to actually cut out your fish, but not that fin at the top. Sorry, my scissors and my paper are not cooperating. So I'm going to cut around the body, including the tail. Don't cut the tail off. You want the tail to stay attached to the fish for now. But when you get to this top part, you can go ahead and cut that off. We're going to attach that separately. So you can just save that, and then we'll cut that part out later. And then when you get to the mouth, just go around the mouth. We're going to cut that part out later too. Okay, so I'll set these aside. I'm still going to need that dorsal fin. And now what I have is just my fish body, including the tail. Okay, now I'm going to scoot this over because we're going to need that, but I'm going to come back to that. Once you have that cut out, then it's time to roll out your first slab, because obviously this isn't going to work. Okay, I'm going to pound this down a little bit. And I'm going to have got my 2 sticks here to make sure that my slab is an even width. I'm going to grab my rolling pin and I'm going to start rolling. So remember, when you roll, you need to roll a little bit and then take it off, flip it to the other side, and roll it. The reason we have the sticks, remember, on each side is so that we roll an even width for our slabs. So I'm going to roll it and I'm going to flip it over again. Okay, and I'm going to roll it. When you can hear your rolling pin on the wood, you'll know that you're done. So let me see. Yeah, my rolling pin is touching the wood, and so I know that this slab is a nice even thickness. Let's check it. And that looks pretty good. Okay, so I'm going to leave that there for now. So go ahead and get your fish, and oh, we got a problem. Okay, so my slab needs to be big enough so that I can fit my entire fish on there. So I'm going to have to do a little bit more rolling here. I might need to add some clay to get this to be the right size, and that's okay. That'll probably happen to you too. Okay, so still not going to work, so I'm going to have to grab some more clay. And let's see if this one works. Nope, that one's not going to be quite big enough either. So this project takes a lot of clay, so you might have to come up and get some more clay, and that is fine if you have to. I'll give you as much as you need. Okay, so I'm just using the wire tool, cutting some clay. And this clay is pretty damp, so we don't have to worry about any problems with wedging it or anything like that. You can just push that in there. Okay, of course we're going to have to smooth that out, but that's okay. That's why we have the rolling pin, and that's why you're going to be flipping this. Okay, so there we go, and let's do another flip. So I'm going to make sure that it's nice and smooth on both sides, and that should be big enough. So let's try again, and yep, just big enough. Okay, so then you're going to take your skewer and you're going to cut around your fish. Hold it straight up and down. And just cut around this fish template that you have. Okay. I'm going to cut around the body. Hold it straight up and down. It's just easier to cut that way. Okay, and then I'm going to pull this off. And I'll save this because I'll use it for my dorsal fin and for my eyes and any other additions that I want to make. Okay, so there's one part of my fish. Now I need two of these, so I'm going to set this aside. Get out my other slab, and remember we already measured and we know that this isn't big enough, so I'm going to have to add just a little bit more. It's almost big enough, so I'll take some of my scraps here and add that to it and give it a roll, and of course give it a flip and make sure that you can see the indentation from my last one. I don't know if you can see that on the camera. Okay, give that a roll and cut out our second fish. Okay, so remember when you are cutting your fish, you want to make sure that your stick is straight up and down, and do the same exact thing. So I'm just going to trace around here with my stick up and down, not sideways like this, but up and down. Trace around here. Oops, got a little crazy there. That's all right. Save these extra pieces because you probably won't need that much extra, but we'll just put the extra back in when we're done. Set your extra parts over to the side, okay, and then peel that off. Okay, now we are definitely going to smooth these edges, but before we do that, because we are going to connect, we're going to attach these two fish together, but before you do that, you're going to take a piece of paper, newspaper, and we're going to crumble it up and set it on the fish. The reason we're doing that is because this fish is actually going to be hollow. We are going to score these two edges. I'm going to move that. We're going to score these two edges, and the ones on the other fish that we made, and we're going to put these two fish together. And let me show you what I mean. I think I put the newspaper on too soon. So I'm going to put these two fish here so you can see them, okay? So the reason that we score is that we don't want anything to fall apart, and so we're going to score all around the edge, and you have to score really well or your fish will not stick together. The scoring is very, very important. So I'm going to score all around both sides of the fish. I mean, when I say both sides, I mean this one and this one, okay? So this might take a second, and I'll try to figure out how to fast forward, but I'm not making any guarantees before I have to post this. Something I gotta figure out though. Yeah, we'll figure it out, right? Okay, so I've scored all around the edge of that one. Do the same thing to the other side. Scoring all around here. When you score it, you kind of like, you of course rough it up, and that makes it so that the clay particles will stick together a little bit better. And I know we've talked about this before, that it's so important to score. It might seem tedious, but you don't want your fish to fall apart, so super important. Okay. All right, so I have scored my fish, and now I'm going to go back to that newspaper. And I'm going to put some newspaper in the body. I'm also going to put some in the tail. Those pieces are going to have to be a little bit smaller. And yes, it's going to start puffing out and being super annoying. Don't worry, we'll make that work. Okay. All right, so I've got my newspaper there. And I take my fish, and if you accidentally scored the wrong side of your fish, because notice that I'm picking this up, flipping it over, and putting it on. If you did that, just flip it over and score the other side. You can smooth it out later. It's no big deal. Okay, so now I've got my fish sandwich here. I'm going to scoot this up so you can see it a little better, and I'm actually going to put a little more newspaper in here. We're going to leave the newspaper in there, and when we put it in the kiln, it'll just burn off, and there'll be like some little tiny paper ashes. It's no big deal. Okay, so I'm going to put some newspaper in there, and now it's time to close this fish up. So what you're going to do is just basically pinch your fish closed. Okay, and we're definitely smoothing this out. This is just the rough, this is just the initial pinching of the fish. Okay, pinch your fish closed. You can see that it's gonna sort of be three-dimensional and stick out. If you don't, it's gonna have form. In other words, if you don't feel like maybe you put enough newspaper in, if it's not puffy enough for your liking, you can put some more fish in. Oh, some more fish. Yeah, he's eating some fish. You can put some more newspaper in, which is what I'm doing because I want my fish to be nice and puffy. Okay. And I think I'm going to put a little bit more in the tail area too. Okay. All right. So remember, this is just your initial closing of your fish, and this is going to be a little bit heavy. This clay is wet, which is good because that means it's easy to work with. And you do want to be careful around this tail area. That can be a point of weakness. I'm actually going to put a little bit more newspaper in there. And probably when you make your fish, when you design your fish in your sketchbook, I will probably warn you or remind you to make sure that the space between your tail and your body is pretty big and not too skinny. You want this to not be too skinny. Okay, so I've got my fish stuffed, and now it's time to kind of smooth it out and make it look a little bit nicer. So I'm going to take a little bit of time to do this. This is going to take you some time. This is called good craftsmanship, when you work to make sure that your project is the best that it can be. If your clay starts to dry out, you can go ahead and get yourself the dog bowl. I'm just going to show it to you, but then put it off to the side. The dog bowl with a little bit of water on one side and the sponge on the other side. So if you feel like your clay is starting to dry up, you can do that. And what I would do is put the sponge in there, flip it over, and just touch your finger to the sponge, because if your clay gets too wet, it won't hold the form that you're trying to make. So you don't want that to happen. So be careful with not using too much water. Okay. So this part's going to take a minute, and again, I'll try to fast forward, but if I don't figure that out, I apologize, and you can fast forward it just a little bit if you need to. Okay, now one of the things, actually I would say don't fast forward it. One of the things that you're going to want to make sure is that your fish can support its own weight. Like, it needs to be able to stand there by itself. We don't want it to tip over. So you can very gently kind of encourage it to do that by just lightly pushing down on it. And also, this is a sculpture, so that means that you're going to be viewing it from all sides. So you want to make sure that you pay attention to both sides of your fish. Don't just do one side and forget about the other side. Okay, so you're going to check all of the edges, make sure your fish is closed up, because I see some gaps here. Okay, smooth your edges down and very gently tap your fish on your canvas. Now, this is a time where if you want, you can kind of play with how you want your tail fin to look. Like, I have mine turning this way, so I might just keep that, or I might have one side turning one way and one side turning the other way, or maybe I won't have it turn at all. I don't know. Now, I don't like what's happening right here. I feel like this is going to be a problem, so I'm actually going to add a little bit of clay here. So if I'm going to add some clay, I need to score it to make sure it will stay. Score both pieces, even though this is just a little scrap. I don't want it to fly off. So I'm putting that in there because I just don't feel that my tail is secure enough. I think it needs a little bit more clay to support the weight of it, so I'm going to put that in. Okay, and I'm trying to work really quickly here, but I want to smooth that out. I think I am going to add just a little bit of water there to smooth it out. Okay. Okay. So I'm going to take a minute here to really smooth out my fish, because this is a big project. It uses a lot of clay, and I just really want to make sure that it looks the best that I can make it look. remembering that it's a sculpture and I'll be able to view it from all sides. Once I feel that one side is good, I'm going to flip it to the other side and make sure that this side looks good too. Anywhere that it's curved, it might need a little extra special attention. Okay, the other thing I'm going to do is just very gently tap it on the canvas here to make sure that it's going to stand. I'm also going to take just a second here to look at the bottom, and you see we have a problem here. So I'm just going to take a little piece of my scrap and I'm going to score it, and I'm going to score this area that is going to be a problem. Remember, I told you the tail area can be a little bit of a problem because it's where it's a little bit thin. Okay, and we don't want the tail to fall off. So just real quick, I'm adding a little bit of clay there. Let's smooth it down, and I think that should do the trick. Okay. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with how my fish looks right now, and I want to do the gill slits and the mouth. And this is really cool. I love how this works. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn my fish so that I can see it from the top view here. And let me scoot the camera back, and I'm going to scoot the fish back a little bit. Okay, so I can see my fish from the top. I can see both sides because I want my gill slits to be symmetrical, or as close to symmetrical as I can get. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a paper clip and open it up. And I want the gill slits to be right around here. So I'm just going to draw where I want them to go. I'm not pushing it all the way through, okay? So what I did was I just sort of drew where I thought I would want it to go, but I want it to be the same on the other side, so I'm going to go up to the top. Let me scoot this back so you can see it. Okay, and I know that my gill slit is right here on this side, so I'm just going to kind of guess where it should go on the other side and draw it on the other side. So I've got a gill slit on this side and one on this side. Now what I'm going to do, now that I'm happy with the way they're placed, I'm going to take that paper clip and I'm actually going to cut into the clay. And if I go around it not perfectly, that's okay. Okay, and then, this is the tricky part, then I'm just going to pull it out a little bit, okay? And then it will be sticking out. Okay, now I'm just going to leave that like that for now. This clay is so wet. I'm just going to leave it for a second. I'm going to do the same thing on this side. Okay, there's where I drew it, and it's not going all the way through, so I'm happy with it. So now I am going to go ahead and make it go all the way through. Okay, and then I'll just take my paper clip and and if that happens, that might happen to you too, that's okay. You can just, there we go. And then just very gently pull it out, okay? And you can smooth over anything like that that happens, okay? So now when I'm looking down on my fish, you can see that it has these gills that are sticking out. That's kind of a fun three-dimensional addition to our form, okay? Okay, now the next thing you're going to do is think about how you want your mouth to look, okay? So refer back to your sketch, and I don't know if you decided to do a mouth that was curving up. Let me turn my fish to the side. I don't know if you decided to do a mouth that was curving up like that, or a mouth that was curving down. That's totally your decision. I think I'm going to do a mouth that is curving down. This guy's going to be a little cranky. So I'm going to draw that in. Okay, so all I did was sort of draw it in the way I want. And then when I'm happy with it, I'm going to take my paper clip and I'm going to kind of saw through my fish like this. So I'm going all the way through to the other side. Okay? Once you do that, then you can open the fish's mouth and manipulate it a little bit. right? So I'm going to have my fish kind of going like that. Okay, I'm pretty happy with the way that looks right now. That's pretty much exactly what I wanted. Now I get to add some details. So I think what I'll do is set my fish down. Hopefully you can see. Such a big project, it's hard to see everything. Now I'm going to add that dorsal fin. So I'm going to go back to my scraps. And if you didn't keep them, if you threw it away and you don't have your scrap, no big deal. You can just draw one. Okay, so I still happen to have my scrap and still happen to have my scissors. And so I'm going to cut this out. But if you, maybe you even decided you want to change the way it looks, that's totally fine. Okay. So I already have these scraps that we rolled out. And let me scoop my fish over a little bit. Remember when we rolled this out, that was our scrap. So I'm just going to take this and put it on there, and I'm going to trace around it. Actually making it a little bit bigger than originally. I don't know why. Okay, now remember, when you want to put something on, you have to score. So I'm going to score the bottom of this, because that's where I want it to go. And I want it to go like right, let me put it on there and see that backwards. I think right about there. So I'm going to mark that, and then I'm going to score that. And you can't just stick it on and hope for the best. Okay, once you do that, you got to use your fingers and pull the clay down. Let me turn them onto a side a little bit so you can see. Pull the clay down. And don't forget the other side, because remember, it's a sculpture. We got to make sure that both sides are looking good. Okay, oh, I am loving the way this guy is looking. Okay, get a load of this guy. Okay, so now we've got gill slits, we have a mouth, we definitely need some eyes. So I think this is my sketch. I was just going to do a pretty simple eye, where I'll show you a little trick if you want your eyes to be about the same size. Take a piece of clay and just divide it in half, and then both will be about the same. So I'm going to roll a sphere. But I don't want his eye to just be a big sphere. I actually want it to be, flat. Oh, maybe that's okay. I'll have to decide if I think that's too big. Once I put it on, I might decide that's too big. We'll see. All right, so my eyes are about the same size, and I definitely want eyeballs. So I'm going to roll 2 more spheres. And you can't just stick them on and hope for the best. Okay, you got to score. Score. Now this clay is pretty wet, so it's probably going to be okay. I'm going to stick it on there and make sure it's working. And I'm actually going to take this marker lid, and I'm just going to see how this works. If I don't like it, I will just try again. Oh yeah, okay, so I've pressed that in, and now I have an eyeball there. If I didn't like it, that's the great thing about clay. If you don't like it, then you just roll it back up and start again. Okay, so make sure that you score and score. Stick it on there. Okay, and I'm going to put this eyeball in again. All right, and now I want my eyes again to be symmetrical like my gill slits are. Let me move my fish up. Okay, so my gill slits are pretty symmetrical. I want my eyes to be symmetrical. So when I put them on, I'm going to look at it from the top to make sure it's symmetrical. And even though those are sticking right now, they're not gonna. So I need to make sure that I score the bottom. Okay, so I scored that. And I'm going to stick it on. And then I'm going to score this one. Uh-oh. Did I forget to score that? I sure did. And I'm going to score where I want to put the eye. Put the eye on. And I'm going to do a little bit of pressing in there to make sure that that stays. Okay, eyes are one of the things that really like to fall off. So you got to make sure that you do a pretty good job of putting your eyes on. Make sure they don't fall off. Okay, so so this is my fish so far. I'm liking the way he looks. I'm worried about his eyes falling off, so I'm really going to press those in. If your clay is pretty damp or pretty wet like this clay, these will probably stick. If your clay is starting to dry out, then you're going to need to take your finger or something and you're going to have to pull some of the eye clay down into the body. Okay, but hopefully that won't happen to you. Okay, the next thing I want to do is, I love my fish's mouth, but I want to give him some lips. So I'm going to roll a coil, okay, and I'm going to, and my coil is not super even, so I'm going to play with it a little bit till I get it even. And I just want to put them around his mouth. Now, if you want, you could try to add teeth. You'll have to be really careful about scoring and slipping so that the teeth don't fall out, but you can definitely try that if you want. So I need to score my, let me scoot that up, score my coil here that I'm going to use for the lips. And score, I'm putting the lips around the edge here. So I'm going to need to score this area around the edge. All around both sides, because he's going to have lips on both sides. Remember, it's a sculpture, view from all the way around, blah, blah, blah. I said that before. Okay, and I'm going to press these lips on. Go around the corner. Is it going to make it? Oh, it's just going to make it. Okay. And of course I'm going to want to smooth that down a little bit because I can see where that connection is and I don't want to see that. If you have extra, like I have this little bit of extra clay, you could take your paper clip and just cut it off, okay? All right, so I am loving how this guy is looking right now. Okay, and I'm just going to use my fingers to kind of pinch the corners there a little bit. And the last thing we need to add to it before we smooth it down and give it some texture is we need to add those pectoral fins, the ones that are on the side. Okay, so use what you need to, one on each side or else he'll just swim in a circle. So use your scraps. If you want, you can cut them out of your initial, or that initial sketch that you did. Sometimes I like to do that because then I know it'll be proportionally the way I wanted it to be. And the other thing I do is I keep all these scraps because then I can look at them to remember what colors I wanted to use. All right, so I'm going to move this guy over and we need 2 of these. So let me see if I think that's smooth enough. Yeah, that'll work. So I'm going to put that there and use my paper clip and trace around. And again, I'm going to want these to be pretty symmetrical. So I'm actually going to take that, and I made this one a little bit bigger. I don't know if you noticed that, so I'm going to trace around this one. Okay, these are called pectoral fins. Okay, now I'm going to look at my fish from the top, right? And when we stick our fins on, we're going to put them so that they kind of curl out to the side. So we're not going to put them all the way on, so you don't have to score the whole back of it. You just need to score the part that you're going to stick to your fish. Okay, so I'm going to put it right about here. So I'm scoring my fish and my fin. And this, for this, you are definitely going to need to take your finger and then blend it in. Okay, you can use a little bit of water if you need to, and then fold it out however you want it to look. Okay, so I'm going to leave it like that, I think. And I'm going to look at my fish from the top, whoops, because I don't want one fin like way back here, you know, I want it to be pretty symmetrical. So I'm looking at where it is on this side, and I'm going to kind of match that up on this side. So I just need to score the back and I just need to score where I'm putting it on the fish. And I'm going to stick it on there. And remember, you need to use your finger to move that clay from the fin onto your fish. And my clay is really wet, which is fine. When it's time to put this away, if you need it to hold its shape, we can maybe put some newspaper under it or something. But since you have art every day, it should be okay. All right, so the last thing I'm going to do before I add the texture is I'm going to smooth all of these edges. So for example, right here, let me scoop my fish. Right here where the gill slits are, it's a little rough, so I'm just going to smooth these edges out. And it takes some time to do this. This is what we call good craftsmanship. Also, if you don't smooth your edges, when it comes out of the kiln, it will be really, really sharp, and you don't want to cut yourself. So it's really important, not only for good craftsmanship, but also for safety. You smooth all of your edges because it can be really, really sharp. So I'm going to take a couple minutes to smooth all of my edges, and then I'll show you how to make some texture on your fish. And I really mean all of the edges. So even these edges around the pectoral fin, where I attached it, I'm going to make sure all of those edges are really smooth. Make sure I get the top of this dorsal fin. Anywhere where I see like fingerprints that I've manipulated the clay, I'm going to smooth that out. Okay. One thing I forgot to do was get a piece of wood to put the clay onto, so I'm going to have to do that so that I have a place for it to dry. Okay, scoop this around. Instead of picking him up, I'm gonna pick him up this one time, and I'm just gonna start moving up. See what happened there? So we got the fish. He's going in two different directions. I just put it back. Okay, his gill slits are really, really messy, really bumpy. So I want to make sure I get that smooth. And I'm looking at him from the front, and his mouth is super crooked. So make sure that, you know, because this is a sculpture, it needs to be viewed from all angles. So when you are finishing it up, make sure you view it from all angles, from the top, from the bottom, from the front, from the back. Okay, so make sure you do that. I could even put a tongue in there. That might be kind of fun. Do fish have tongues? I don't know. I guess that's something to Google, right? Okay, looking on that side. Looking pretty good. This process of smoothing the edges and finishing it off, this is a really important process, and it will take you some time to do this, so don't rush it. You know, you've put a lot of effort into this project. You want it to turn out really well, so take some time to develop your craftsmanship by going over the edges and making sure that it looks the best that you can make it look. I'm going to scoot him over. Do you see how his tail is kind of curved, and it's really, really bumpy there? So I'm going to smooth that. And take some time here. Now, so thinking about texture for your fish. Fish have scales and it's repetitive, so you're going to want to make something that you're going to be repeating. Your texture is going to repeat itself. You can put you know, different sizes of scales on your fish. Maybe you want them to be larger on the bottom and smaller on the top, or whatever you want. I mean, that's totally up to you. I do want some texture on your fish. That's part of the project, so you can't just leave it with no texture at all. So you need to put some kind of texture. I mean, fish do have different textures. If you think about how a shark might feel versus how a trout might feel, obviously they are different. So you can be thinking about that when you're thinking about how you want to do your texture. Okay, so I'm going to scoot this over to the side. There are tools you can look at to figure out how you want to do your texture. I have a couple of these. So you can press these in your clay to make a scale if you want. Definitely try this on a piece of scrap before you do it on your project, just to make sure it's the look that you want. The other thing you can do is you can make some texture on your fins by taking your stick and drawing some lines if you want. I'm going to go ahead and do that. I should have done that before I put it on. I kind of forgot. So if you have watched this whole video before you even started, then you can remember to do that. I'm also going to do that on the tail. Yeah, the tail usually has some lines on it, so I'll do that. Okay, and okay. I didn't like the way these ones turned out, so I'm going to go ahead and do those again, and that's okay, right? If you don't like the way something looks, change it. Okay, sorry you're getting a view of my arm. This project is so big, and it doesn't want to get, the camera doesn't want to get the whole project. Okay. Alright, I'm going to go with that. Now, I like the way this looks, so I'm going to go ahead and use this ribbon. This is a ribbon cutting tool. I'm going to go ahead and use that to make my scale textures. And let's see, I think I will start... Oh, you know what else you can do is you can make some lines on your pectoral fin if you want. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And again, if you don't like the way those lines turn out, you can just go ahead and smooth down the clay and start again. Okay. All right, I'm pretty happy with that. And now I just need to put some scales on. And again, if you start doing your scales and you don't like the way they look, then you can just press them, you know, just smooth them out of your clay. No big deal. So take your time, make it look the way you want it to look. Okay, I'm so happy with this guy. All right, let's start over here. One thing you'll notice about scales is they aren't usually, I don't know how to explain this. They sort of, I don't know how to explain it. I'll have to explain it in person. Okay, now I don't like that one went a little too deep, so I'm gonna just smooth it over and try again. And that is definitely okay. All right, I think I'm good with that. All right, so take one final look at your project. Look at it from all angles. Make sure that you have smoothed down, like I forgot to smooth down the inside of the gill. And if you're not sure, just ask me or ask a neighbor and say, hey, do you see anything that I need to maybe just take one final look at? Because sometimes when you work on something for so long, you don't see what needs to be fixed. Okay. All right, so like that. Look at it from this side. Got to smooth the inside of the gill. So when I say that, I mean this like inside part. Okay. All right, and I think we will call that a day. And then once this dries and we fire it, then we'll glaze it. And that's kind of why I want you to keep your original, even if it's cut up like that, because that shows you what colors you were thinking about using. And if you throw it away, just draw yourself another one, but I want you to have a plan for how you want to glaze your fish before you start glazing. I will ask you to see that. All right, so here we go. I'm going to see if I can move the camera to show you what this fish looks like. Sorry about that. Okay, so here's what he looks like. And I'm pretty happy with them, and I will see you soon.